much for coming today for our Hispanic Heritage Month Culture Chat. I'd like to get started with introductions, so if you would just go around and introduce yourselves, and we'll start with you, Miss Davis, and tell us what your role is at Winter's Mill.
My name is Claudia Davis, and I am the Hispanic Student Liaison for Winters Mill High and 7 more schools.
I'm Miss Bowersox. I teach social studies here at Winters Mill.
I'm Abdielis, Torres, and I'm a senior here.
Marely?
Okay, so my name is Marely Cruz, and I'm a senior at Winters Mill.
Great. Okay, so the next question, thank you all for coming, I appreciate that. So the next question is, how would you describe your cultural background? What traditions or celebrations are important to your family? And feel free, whoever wants to start, and we'll just take turns.
I'm actually from Bogota, Colombia. I migrated to the United States about 21 years ago, and I came for 6 months to learn English, and then I was going back to my country. With the traditions, we have different traditions. Family is really important for me. I actually have 2 kids, and my husband is American, so he had to be into the Hispanic culture. He had to be invited. Main traditions are like Christmas. We celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve instead of Christmas Day. We have a big party. We wait until midnight and we open all the presents. That's a big one for us. The quinceañera, because my daughter is turning 15 next year and she's already talking about that. And we have different other traditions, but those are the main ones.
Nice, thank you.
So my father was born in Cuba. He came here in early 1960s. My mother's American, so I'm half Cuban, half American. Biggest traditions, we've moved around a lot. My parents, since I graduated, have moved around a lot, and I always know I'm home when I hear Spanish guitar playing in the house. Like my dad, it lives on his Alexa. And a big one is food, like different things. And my mom, being American, like your husband, she had to learn a lot of things from my father and my aunts and my grandparents, and she learned how to cook a lot of Cuban meals. Like sometimes for Thanksgiving, we do pork and black beans and rice instead of turkey. But so food's a big one for us.
My mom and dad are both from Puerto Rico, so I'm like Puerto Rican, but I was born here. And the tradition is just like eating like pork shoulders on Christmas, which is like a big one in the Puerto Rican culture.
Great.
Okay, yeah, I can add some stuff. So I'm Puerto Rican, my family's Puerto Rican. I was actually born in San Juan, and then we moved here when I was very little to Maryland, and then so I would say one of the most important celebrations, definitely the quinceañera for me was one of the most important. And I had mine 2 years ago when I was 15, and it was a very, very special moment, at least for me. I got to dance with my dad, my grandpa, and it was just like this huge celebration of growing up, and it was a lot of fun. My sisters both had one before me, and those were also very enjoyable. I like the New Year's tradition. I don't know if you guys do this one too, but on New Year's Eve, well, on New Year's Day actually, when it turns midnight, we do the 12th grade. For basically each grade is like it's your new wish for one of the 12 months of the new year. And so you eat 12 grapes at midnight, and you have your wishes just for the new year, and you hope for blessings, and you hope for things that you want for this new year. We do the 13th day as well, which is January 6th. That's a big celebration. I always think of it as my second Christmas, and it's a lot of fun to just get an extra day where everyone gets to come together and celebrate, and yeah.
Great, thank you. So tell us a little bit about your experiences growing up in your family and what ways this might have impacted your views.
I grew up in Colombia, so it was non-diverse world where I live. Everybody's Catholic. Everybody that I knew was Catholic. I went to Catholic school all my life, private school. So once I came to the States, my views changed a little bit. I became a minority instead of majority, and that was a big shock for me at the beginning. But I still carry the Catholic faith from my family. I still carry a lot of traditions from back in my country, and I try to give that to my kids too.
Yeah. I grew up much like most other people in Carroll County. I'm from Westminster. I went to Winters Mill. We didn't live very differently than many of my friends, but just what my father had been through and his family, like they didn't come here by choice. They came after after the revolution, so they were kind of forced out. And so like his family was split up for like 15 years. His siblings were all over the world, and they finally reconvened. So just hearing about like what he had been through in a communist country and like kind of sparked a lot of my interest in politics and world relations, which then led me to become a social studies teacher. And then also hearing from my dad and my uncle, my aunts about when they came here as teenagers, being like not speaking the language, not knowing any other Hispanic teenagers, and just being in school before there were like ESOL student supports and like all of that. It just kind of gave me like a bigger heart towards those kids and like wanting to make sure like they are being helped in my classrooms, and just having a little bit more of a connection to it has really shaped how I am as a teacher. Yeah.
For me, I grew up learning both languages at the same time, so it's really like learning both languages like really opened my eyes and like thinking like in different ways and in more like in-depth ways of like how things could be solved or like what things like actually are like.
Yeah.
For me, I learned Spanish first, and then I learned English like when I was still really little, but I was starting like preschool and kindergarten and all that stuff. And I remember my mom always tells me that the teacher who I had for pre-K or kindergarten, I don't remember who, would tell my parents to not worry about teaching me English, to make sure that I didn't forget, my Spanish, to make sure that I had that embedded in me and my cultural heritage, that we could worry about that, and they would worry about teaching English. That's what they were there for. So I like to know even nowadays that they were so invested in me not losing a part of myself, a part that is very large in myself. And I think growing up, I grew up in Maryland, mostly, and I would say there are just there are many differences from growing here in Puerto Rico, which I didn't. Most of my family has grown up over there, except me and my sisters. But I think that the thing that I find most different is just that most people here don't speak Spanish, I guess. At least as I was growing up, there weren't a lot of Hispanics or Latinos in my classes. I would typically be only one or one of like two or three, which is way different from Puerto Rico, obviously. But I guess that impacted me in just making sure that I wanted to maintain my cultural identity because there wasn't a lot of it, right? So I couldn't retain it from everyone else. I had to maintain that to myself, which I think my parents have done a great job at, my family has done a great job at, and I'm very, very proud of my heritage.
That's fantastic. So talk to us a little bit about the next question here. Have you ever been treated poorly because of your ethnicity, race, or beliefs? And if so, in what ways?
I have always been very lucky. The only time I remember that I was treated poorly was when I was working at the bank. And I live in a community where it's mainly Caucasian. And this guy came in, and I asked him how I could help him, and he heard that I had an accent, and he didn't want me to help him at all. He said, I want somebody else. And nobody else was in front. And that was the only time that I have felt bad, have felt that I discriminated against. But other than that, I've been really lucky.
I'd say the same for me. I've never directly felt any like malice or hatreds towards me based on like my culture, my background. I know in high school, like Abby and I were talking about, I've grown up here, there weren't many Hispanic kids in the school. Her uncle and I were like two of the only ones I knew. We were the butt of a lot of jokes, but it was like from our friends. And while like I wasn't offended by it then, and I don't think I am now, because it was like, I don't know, it wasn't ever ill will. It was just kind of what you would joke with your friends about. Sometimes kids that weren't really my friends would try to joke, and then it's like, all right, I don't know you like that. But Never anything like malice at all. The only time it ever hit my family was my brother played soccer at a high school here in town. And there was a racial slur used towards him by some other kids on the team. And so I was in middle school, and that was the first time I ever even like became aware of racism and like understanding like some people might think of us different because of where my dad was born. And so that was the first time it really like struck me that there's these different views on people just based on stuff that's out of their control. But yeah, I've never once had any like true negative experiences with it.
For me, I've never like really had like any like bad like experiences, but like people just like associate me being like from like other Hispanic country. Like everybody thinks like, oh, you're Hispanic, you're like from Mexico, when there's like
Yes.
different. There's a lot of other like Spanish speaking countries, and like it's really aggravating being associated with like one main country when there's a bunch of other different countries with a bunch of beautiful cultures.
Yeah, people kind of like lump your family into like their stereotypical thought of a Mexican family and not understanding that there's like so many different types. Yeah, I hear you on that.
Or Spanish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spanish, yeah.
No, I agree so much with that, and especially like the generalizations that come with everyone thinking that you're all from Mexico. Because I think personally for me, it's been mostly like microaggressions. I don't think people have generally been outward just like super offensive to me. I will say I do have one example, but anyway, I think it's so strange to me that especially like citizens of the U.S. like. The U.S. is so diverse in itself, and no one, like, everyone looks different, right? So it's so crazy to me that everyone thinks that all Hispanics have to look the same. It's like you come from somewhere where everyone looks different, but you expect everyone to look the same just because they come from somewhere else. It's so strange to me, the concept. And I guess, well, for me at least, that most people don't even think that I'm Hispanic because I'm pale, because I have light skin, or because I don't have like an accent or a strong accent at least, and it always shocks me. And then when I speak Spanish, we're like, oh wait, whoa, so like you're Spanish, or when they hear my name, and it was so strange to me. I was like, because when I'm with other Hispanics, they tend to know immediately almost, like they don't even tend to assume that I'm just American, like they tend to know that I'm Hispanic, and so it's so strange to me why people would assume that I wasn't. Or I get Italian a lot too. People think I'm Italian. I don't know why. But, I will say one experience I had, which wasn't that long. Well, there was two instances that I remember pretty clearly, but the biggest thing that I ever got told directly was just to not speak Spanish in front of other people, and that was also weird to me just because I don't understand what the obsession is with other people speaking a different language if they're not talking to you. Like, I don't get it. Personally, I've never had a problem with other people speaking their own languages. I think it's kind of beautiful, actually, that we all can speak so many. That there are people who can speak so many languages, but yeah, that's the main one.
Thank you. So the next question is similar in that to the previous one, but have people ever made incorrect assumptions? And I think, Marely, you talked a little bit about that too. Any other incorrect assumptions about you and your family, and in a way that's caused problems?
I actually have something funny that happened to me. I was a stay-at-home mom. My kids are being raised bilingual, and they're fully bilingual. So I was at the park, and since this park they were only Caucasian, I was the only one speaking Spanish, and people thought that I was either the au pair or the nanny for my kids. So it was kind of funny because then they will try to talk to me, and I would turn around and speak English, and they would look at me like, "What happened?" And they're my kids. But it was funny. I think it was a little bit of ignorance from their part, but I was okay with it. I try to speak Spanish with my kids all the time. They're not allowed to speak English to me. They speak Spanish all the time. It doesn't matter where we are. If people kind of look at us weird, it doesn't really matter. My kids carry their culture, their Hispanic culture in their blood, and they're proud of it. So it was fun.
I can identify with Marely because I don't look Hispanic. Like, if you see me, you don't immediately think, like, oh, she's half something else. I get Italian and Greek a lot. So when my maiden name was Fajardo, so people would see that name and then they'd see me and they'd be like, it doesn't make sense. And then I'd get a lot of questions. And then the one thing, it's a funny story from my mom. So my mom has like reddish hair and bright blue eyes. And then as a baby, I looked much more Hispanic. I had like black hair and I was this little like olive skin thing. My sister has really curly hair. She looks super Hispanic. And she said there was a plumber came to the house once while we were home. I was like 3. And he goes, oh man, it was so nice of you to adopt. And my mom was like, they're mine. And he was like, I'm so sorry. She just always thought that was the funniest thing because we looked nothing like my mother. At all, but it's nothing that's ever been a problem. A lot of it is ignorance, and my dad always taught us to like know people are going to be ignorant about what we are, who you are, what your family's like, and then just to like use that as like an opportunity of power to teach people, because you like have this ability to teach people about a culture or about a country that they might not know about, and that's actually a cool thing, and not to treat it as like they don't know a lot. Like I said, no one's ever been mean to me about it. I've never had horrible experiences, but it is a cool opportunity to like extend this opportunity of knowledge to people about something they don't know.
I'm with you on like a bunch of things. Like a lot of people, I go by like Abby, which is like my nickname. So like a lot of people are like, what's your real name? And I'll tell them, they're like, well, like where are you from? Like, how'd you get that name? And it's just like so many questions after questions after questions. So like just like getting like a chance to like answer the questions of like telling them where I'm from and like just like showing them like who I like actually am like at home, and not just like the persona I put on at school is like very like fun, and it's a cool thing to do, and like being able to teach them.
Yeah. For me, yeah, it's kind of a mix of what you all said, really. But I think for me the big assumption is that I'm not Hispanic, or at least myself if I am, that I'm Mexican. That's always a big assumption, which, not that there's anything, wrong with being Mexican, but there are 20 other Hispanic countries, Spanish-speaking countries. I just think it's so weird that that's the one everyone always assumes every Hispanic is. And, what was I going to say? There was one time several years ago. I like what Ms. Bowersox said about the education thing, because that is so big for me, and I love to be able to like inform somebody on something that they don't know about, like they genuinely are unaware of. And I remember a few years ago, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, there was this kid in my social studies class that was making deportation jokes. I don't remember why, but he was joking, hey, Marely, you get deported if this happens, etc. And I just kind of looked at him, because it's also strange to me that most people don't know that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. So people born there are American citizens, not first class, but still by birth, since like I don't know the date, but 1920 or 1917 or something like that. So I was already a citizen when I was born, so I just kind of looked at him strangely for a sec, and then I explained to him why I was looking at him like that. He was like, oh. Like, you make deportation jokes anyway, because it's a real issue for a lot of people, and there's a lot of, families that suffer from problems with deportation causes. But
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So our last question to sort of round out our discussion here today is, what makes Hispanic Heritage Month important to you? And I know, you've talked a lot about a lot of different things. So, yeah, what does it mean for you?
It's very important because other cultures can learn about our culture, about how we are, how we work, how we learn, how everything, how we come to the States, how we struggle, how some of our families live, everything is very, very important. It's just a month dedicated to us, nobody else.
Yeah.
I like it because being a history teacher, like we do focus on like the big names, and it's all typically older white men. And because that it just is what it is. It's how our country was founded. But these months give an opportunity to hear the lesser known stories and to learn the lesser known people from all these different cultural backgrounds. And kind of what we've been talking about with this whole like generalization that all Hispanics are Mexican. I mean, the history of that is just because when we expanded west, that was the first Spanish group that was here. So for generations, if you saw a Hispanic, it was most likely that they were Mexican until more modern immigration started happening. So this month kind of sheds lights on all of these different countries and cultures and people that go beyond Mexico, that have played a part in growing America.
Yeah.
I agree a lot with what they both said, but like the most part I like is just like being able to celebrate like where I'm from and like the different things that like we do. Like, yeah, like Puerto Ricans, we just celebrate year round. Just having like
always
this
a party.
just having like this 1 month dedicated to just like Hispanics and like just the Spanish culture is very I don't know, appreciative, I guess you could say.
Makes you feel seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, I think that there's two main reasons that I think this month is so important for me. Obviously, I'm Hispanic, and I want to be able to recognize, the Hispanics that came before me, that paved the way for me to have certain rights that I have, that are still fighting, the ones still fighting today to get rid of ignorance and get rid of those generalizations. Another thing that always stuck with me is, I don't know if, I'm sure a lot of you know this, but Hispanics have been portrayed in a certain way in the media for a very long time, right? They're usually, at least in all the, I love crime shows, but I hate the fact that Hispanics are always like the drug dealers, or they're always the ones involved in gangs, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but to only always see that in the media, it really messes with your brain, right? Because I'm Hispanic, I have family members who are Hispanic, I have friends who are Hispanic, I see day in day, time and time again, that there are so many, they're all complex people, they're not just one thing, we're all not in just one category. So Hispanic Heritage Month is so important because you get to see, all these, you get to recognize all these important people in history and still in the world today that are still making a difference, they're still fighting an effort for equality, and you get to see that they're not, just what the media has told you they are for so many years.
That's fantastic. Thanks, you guys, so much. I've appreciated getting to know each one of you a little bit better. And that is one thing that I love hearing the stories about your backgrounds and kind of what brought you and what makes you you. So thank you again. I appreciate that you've been willing to give up your time to share with us. And is there anything else before we go that you want to know?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Marely.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I'm really bummed